Welcome, everyone. Glad for you to join us today. I have Mark Beal here, who's a professor at Rutgers University, a great author. I thought it'd be a great theme today to have a conversation about job search related to those that are just graduating college. This is the time of year when everyone is getting out, and you need to know exactly what to do. And I first met Mark at the Breakfast Club, which is a networking event in New Jersey, and he and Frank Kovacs wrote a book, The Transition. And Mark, you're welcome to share your latest book now with everyone here.
Well, Ken, I appreciate it. So my latest book is titled Gen Z Graduates to Adulthood. And the focus of that book are the oldest members of Gen Z, who are ages 22, 23, 24, 25. Those, as you said, who graduated or are graduating this month from college and making the transition from college to career, and those who did that over the last year or two or three. And I just thought it'd be interesting to focus on those older members or the oldest members of Gen Z, because they're no longer in school. They're earning, full-time salaries. They're making decisions about how they're going to spend that salary, whether that's, leasing apartments, making purchases, determining what brands they're going to become customers of. So the book has two big pieces to it. One is the advice and recommendations from 65 of the oldest members of Gen Z to employers on how to recruit and retain them. And so these are testimonials from these 65, which I really love, because the way you open the book and you get a sense of, from the minds and mouths of Gen Zers, here's what an employer should do. Here's how they should recruit me. Here's how they should retain me. And then another section just on how marketers can effectively engage this generation as they start to make decisions about brands they may support now and for the next 20, 30, 40 years.
So you got your first shout out, Christine Dykman.
Thank you, Christine.
Mark, it's awesome.
I always love collaborating with Christine.
I think, and anyone who wants to join, again, this is an open conversation. This is not just a Q&A with myself and Mark. So if you have questions along the way, Mark will really be happy to answer them. Oh God, Terry, I can't believe Terry's in the Virgin Islands. God bless you for joining us from the Virgin Islands.
Thank you for tuning in.
One thing I thought about, even in the discussion, is how have the past couple of years with COVID, in terms of job search and classes and networking, impacted what you've seen, from the generation, from your students?
Great question, and it's something that I address in the first few slides when I deliver my Gen Z keynote speeches. What I say is that the pandemic has impacted all of us, no matter what age, right? No matter what age, it's impacted some very seriously. But for Generation Z, it took place during their most formative years. And again, milestones that many of us got to experience and enjoy, internships while we're in college, in-person learning, walking across the stage and actually be part of a graduation ceremony. So for those that graduated in 2020, 2021, they lost out on a lot of those opportunities. And what it led to for many of them, especially that class that graduated again in May 2020, when we were kind of at a peak of the pandemic, they lost out on internships. So all of a sudden their resume was bare, say, compared to those who graduated in 17, 18, 19. There was a concern there. Wow, when I graduate, my resume is not going to be as robust as previous college graduates. Those who graduated in May 2020, many of them did not get a job for 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 months. I can think back to many of my students who graduated in May 2020, and they secured that first job in March, April, May of 21. That's almost a year of being on the sidelines. And as we know, searching for that job can be very frustrating. It can be a lot of setbacks along the way. So all of those things combine into the fact that this pandemic's had incredible impact on this generation during their most formative years. It also has led to, and they're very open about discussing this, but mental health is very, very important. It's a priority area for them. It's a priority goal-setting area for them. When I survey Gen Zers across the country and I give them a few options: mental health, professional development, financial health, physical fitness, mental health, always at around 30% is the number one area of focus or number one priority for them. And I'll bridge this to employers. So I think in 10, 12 years, we're going to look back and Gen Z will get the credit for making mental health a topic, an open topic, no longer taboo, but something we can discuss openly, whether at the workforce or just socially. That's one. But two, I'm hearing from many Gen Zers who just graduated in the class of 2022, and they're calling me and saying, hey, I got the job. I'm excited. This is great. And, back in my generation, an old Gen Xer like me, the first thing I would have said, and they're giving me a great salary, or they're giving, whatever. They're not even bringing that up. What they're saying is, and one of the great benefits I'm receiving are mental health days. That's what's resonating with them. Not the salary, although that's important.
Right.
Not some of the other benefits that come to mind for me first, like 401k and medical and health. They're saying, I get mental health days. So from an employer standpoint, that's important. It's resonating, and Gen Zers see that as valuable, a valuable benefit. The fact that you as an employer care so much, or concerned about me, that you're actually giving me those mental health days. Now, maybe in the old days we called those PTO days or sick days, but I think this generation is influencing the fact that now employers are offering mental health days.
So just a few shout outs. Marty is coming in from Chicago. Dr. Scott Dell from South Carolina. He is in a similar space to you. And I know I actually invited him to this. And one of the things that I wondered about as you were talking about COVID, the idea of having to apply online, not so much, but actually have the Zoom interviews and the technology. I would think that would to some extent be a benefit or something they'd be more comfortable with. But at the same time, there is a certain challenge to that. So I don't know if that's something that you notice as well, as more of a comfort level with that type of interview.
I think so. So if we go back right around the end of February, early March of 2020 is when most college students at that time, so the oldest members of Gen Z, were told, time that we have to leave campus, we're going to go to remote learning, we're going to do this very quickly and turn this around from 1 week to the next. So for those of us who didn't know even what Zoom was prior to that, we all have our PhDs in Zoom now. And so now if we fast forward to this class of 2022, and again, I taught this past semester as many as probably close to 75 seniors. So they were all graduating across different courses. And I can only think of one, fairly sure I can only think of one, who actually had in-person interviews. Everyone else was either Zoom or phone. And to your point, for any of us, it doesn't matter what generation you're from, Zoom and phone, there are advantages. One of those advantages is all that research you do to prepare for the interview, all the research about the company, all the research about the individuals conducting the interviews. You can now, take those notes and really kind of put those notes in front of you on a Zoom call, and especially on a phone call, where you're not trying to memorize all that when you're in an in-person. So I think there's an advantage there. You can also, on those same notes, feature, here's 3 very smart questions that I'm going to ask this employer, or here's potential questions they may ask me, and here's kind of how I think I'll respond to those. So not that you don't prepare the same way when you're in person, but at least through Zoom and phone, you can kind of put those notes on a wall in front of you or near you so that you can refer to them, just so you don't forget, I want to make sure I get that question in before this interview ends. And I think Gen Z does that very well.
So Joey asked a question, which I get all the time. Thoughts and suggestions for multiple generations working together. I know I like to position people of our age as a mentor, someone who will lead a team, not someone that's overqualified or experienced, able to share their experience, because we know different things, but we have to be willing to learn from those that are coming up, because they have different understanding. So I'd love to get your feedback.
Yeah, great question from Joey. And I agree with you, Ken. One of the things Gen Z tells me all the time is when we go into the workforce, we're looking for mentors, not just managers, right? And there's a huge difference, right? The manager is kind of, here's the task, get them done. I need this done by 5 o'clock today. We still have that. But the mentor is also concerned about career development, professional development, helping them set and achieve SMART goals over the next 3, 6, 9, 12 months. So I'm a big believer in that. Right now in any workplace, we could have boomers, Xers, millennials, and Gen Z, right? We easily could have that. And maybe in some workplaces, we just have Xers, millennials, and boomers, and Gen Zers. But here's what I think. I think everybody brings something to the table. I really do. I think, as you said, Gen Xer like me, well, I bring 30 years of experience, 30 years of successes, 30 years of failures, 30 years of lessons learned, 30 years of a vast network of contacts. So there's some value in that. The Gen Zer doesn't really have any of that because their experience is limited. Their contacts are probably limited. But what they bring is, they love technology. They could bring solutions from a technological standpoint. They could bring innovation from, have we tried it this way? Have you thought about doing this? Have you thought about maybe using Slack as a way of communicating? Just things like that So I think they bring a lot of that they're using in college, that if the millennials, Xers, and boomers have open ears and open minds, they might say, well, why don't we try that? Let's give that a shot. So I do think there's value, and I think everyone can learn from each other, collaborate together. But I think everybody does bring value to the workplace, just different types of value.
So to piggyback, Dr. Scott, what can colleges or faculties do to help their students that are having challenges and engaging, possibly due to mental health or other due to mental health or other issues, and they choose not to engage? I mean, that's a tricky thing. But do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, again, this past semester I taught 4 courses, and mostly Gen Zers, mostly. And, many of the Gen Zers were very open to me about, hey, I may be having some issues this week, or, I may not be able to get that assignment to you on time. Just dealing with a few things here. So I think, at least from my perspective we'll talk about on the professor side, just being open-minded, understanding that, as I just sent emails out to all my summer students, they're managing a lot. They're managing courses, internships, part-time jobs, and other responsibilities and obligations, from potentially family to sports to clubs. So there's a lot going on. They are not just taking, a course or 2 or 3. There's a lot going on in their world. And so I think it's, at least from my perspective, being, again, I'll just say from the professor's perspective, open-minded, eager and willing to help and assist any way possible, not being so rigid. A simple thing like, the deadline for the assignment might be today, but I understand you're dealing with some things, you're managing some things, you're working your way through some other things outside the class. It can't be so rigid that, if you can't give me an assignment today, that's too bad. No, it's got to be more, no worries. Focus on what you've got to focus on. When you get through that, I'm here to help. Tell me what I can do to assist. So I think that's just got to be at least the approach of being, again, open-minded and willing to help.
So Alex, our good friend Alex, is looking for his reaction to the statement. Many Gen Zers do not exhibit mature attitudes. They need a few more years under their belt to grow up. Okay.
Alex always has very great questions. I tell them this all the time. He always likes to throw a little curveball, which is a great question.
Yep.
But I've said this a few times lately. Put 100 Gen Zers in a room, and I think you're going to have, just all types. You might have 10 to 15 to 20 who are mature beyond their years. What Alex is talking about, and I've even written that in recommendation letters to employers. This student is mature beyond their years. They don't act like a 22-year-old. They actually more act like a 25, 26, 27-year-old. And then there may be others, at your point, don't have the experience. Maybe they don't have that level of maturity yet. And they're working on that and they're building on that. So from an employer perspective, I think, and again, every employer is different. They've got to take each candidate one at a time, look at each candidate as an individual and determine, is this the kind of candidate that, maybe right now they're not as mature as that candidate, but we see growth in them. We see their ability to advance here. We think they could be a great fit for our culture here, whatever that might be. Right. I think maturity is just one factor in that.
I think a part of it also, and we were a little talking about it before, colleges teach a lot of things, and they started to teach about financial things. I don't know how many of them actually teach about interviewing or things along those lines, things that are real life, not that the other things aren't. I think a lot of times kids just don't know. When I'm mentoring at William Patterson, I'm mentoring first generation in this country students who don't have the same support at home through no fault of their own. So they don't know what they don't know. And I hate to paint a broad stroke with things, but people of our age have certain things that are perceived as negatives the same way in a different way than younger people do. So, I would love to see more classes about networking and job search that are not just in a textbook.
I completely agree. I completely agree with you. One of my earlier books, my first book I ever wrote was called 101 Lessons They Never Taught You in College. It was about preparing to go from college to career, because I had students coming up to me all the time. How do I prepare for this interview? What do I do after the interview? Do I send a thank you note? All those things. And in that, I think it was in that book I wrote, I think it's sophomore year, because I think freshman year when you go to college, you're just onboarding. You're just trying to figure out the campus, the courses, the differences between high school and college. But I think by sophomore year, you settled in a little bit, and it's not quite junior and senior. And I think it'd be great for every student across America in their sophomore year, whether first semester or second semester, to take an entire 14, 15-week course on kind of career preparation, career development. And that would capture everything you're talking about, Ken, from LinkedIn and leveraging LinkedIn to resume development, to cover letter development, to conducting interviews, phone, Zoom, in person, like all those things, networking, very important. Because I think if you do that in sophomore year, now you've got the summer between sophomore and junior year, you've got all junior year, you have all senior year to kind of put that into action to secure those internships, network with professionals, and really set yourself up for success come May or June of the year you graduate. So I did write that in one of my books. I can't remember where, but I really do think sophomore year, that should be a mandatory core course for every student that goes to colleges. We'll just call it Career 101 or Career Development 101, whatever you want to call it. But I think sophomore year would be the ideal time for that.
So Scott, I can speak, this is probably true from a couple of colleges, getting students to participate in career service offices. I will say this, one of the negatives to career service offices, in my opinion, and again, it's just my opinion, is they don't know a lot about what is out there and available, and they get a lot of this information from the same old employers and recruiters because they just don't know. So part of, I think, the networking part and the job search part has to really include them as well. So what do you think?
Yeah, I love that question from Scott. I think on the flip side, and I've mentioned this to more than a dozen students in the past month, when I've received calls from them, they say, hey, can you help me develop my resume and prepare and secure internships and all those things, which again, I do as my way of giving back. That's not right. Courses. I do it. And I do it, but I also say, are you aware there's actually a career services center here on campus? Are you aware there's actually a career, counselors within your school or within your department on campus? And I think a lot of students actually aren't aware of it. They may just not be aware of it, or they just haven't thought about that. So I think part of it is, one, awareness, getting more students to be aware that some of these resources are on campus. Now, to your point, Ken, there's all types of resources they offer, which again, very valuable. Some are just getting that resume. For many students, their resume is a blank sheet of paper. Mm-hmm. So it's going from a blank sheet of paper to something that's telling a compelling story. For some, it's, as you said, identifying opportunities for internships and jobs. And so part of that career center is trying to constantly keep up with opportunities and jobs that are fresh, that are available, that they're looking for students, whether current students or recent graduates. But at least I've noticed, again, just a lot of students who maybe weren't aware this was even available to them on campus that they could leverage to their benefit as they start to seek internships and jobs. So, but it's about, to me, I'm a big believer when it comes to career and workforce. And we know this from career networking organizations. All those resources are valuable, right? Each and every one of us can take something from them. We just have to seek them out, find them. And so whether that's, again, helping develop the resume, or it's helping prepare for an interview, or it's helping identify actual opportunities, I think all those career services are incredibly valuable. We just have to be aware that they exist. And we have to.
I would liken it. So the best context I can make is you've got a board of ed for a school district, and then you've got a PTO that works with the parents and the like. We as job search professionals could be that PTO for the colleges and be the resources for them in ways that they either can't or are not sure what to do. And I'm not sure how you bring that all about, but a lot of us, we reach out to people all the time, and sometimes we don't hear back. And I think it's up to the institutions to recognize that there's a lot of people out there who can help and support in ways that they either may not be able to, or they may have more real life experience.
Yeah, it's either way, it's becoming more and more valuable for the students, right, to have that career center, career services, career advisors, especially as they get into that latter sophomore, junior, senior year, to be able to, again, leverage any and all those resources that exist on their campus.
So Marty asked, what is the most insightful thought or question you have heard from your students? And do they have strategies to combat ageism at their level?
All right, so we've got a couple questions in there.
Right.
I think, again, as it relates to career and workplace and all those kinds of things, Marty, from an insightful thought or question, if I forget the second part of that, Ken, just keep me posted. Okay. I think the first part, students, especially as they're preparing for whether it's an internship or a job interview, they really do develop and think about smart questions they need to be asking as they go into that interview. So simple questions, what is success? So if I'm interviewing right today for an internship this summer, well, what is success in the eyes of the employer for an internship at your organization? Can you describe that? Can you put that in words? Because I want to be the most successful intern you've ever had. So I have students who think through those questions, which I think is really interesting and insightful. The fact that they're not thinking of, for lack of a better word, just the X's and O's, but they're thinking a little bit more strategically about how they're going to go in and conduct that interview. And again, turn the interview into what I call a conversation, because I think we all agree, if you can convert the interview into a conversation, at the end of the day, the employer might say, you know what, I had a great conversation with that student from that university. I really, really enjoyed that. So I see a lot of that. One of the things that we haven't touched on yet for Gen Zers, Gen Z is the most diverse, the most inclusive generation. So in all my research, Gen Zers will say the number one thing they're looking for in a future employer is a corporate culture of diversity, inclusion, and belonging. They want to go somewhere they really belong. They don't want to just be a cog in the machine. So that's something they're looking for. They're asking questions about. They're conducting research on. So I think that's also, very insightful as well, as far as kind of pushing into that area of, well, is this organization, open to diverse thinking, diverse backgrounds, diverse experiences? Because that's where I want to belong. And that's what I want to be a part of. So that's at least a few of the things that I'm hearing consistently from Gen Zers, whether they're seniors graduating or sophomores and juniors preparing for internships. The other thing I'll just throw in there, two more, excuse me. One is Gen Z is the purpose generation. So especially coming out of 2020, they're looking towards employers who demonstrate a higher purpose than just profit. So they're looking to belong to organizations that kind of stand for more, believe in more, believe they have a purposeful way to contribute to communities and society at large. Gen Z will talk a lot about a brand like Patagonia and say that's a purposeful brand, right? Because Patagonia is all about a better planet, a healthier planet, a safer planet. And then on top of, so purpose over profit is something that they're seeking. And then as we talked a little bit earlier, this idea of just maybe different types of benefits, different types of things they're looking for the employer to offer them beyond the traditional great salary, a great benefit. As I mentioned earlier, right now, the mental health day benefit is resonating significantly with Gen Zers as they accept jobs and receive their contracts. And that's the one thing that they tell me first about after they say, hey, by the way, I got the job and it's great that I'm getting mental health benefits. So they're just looking at it a little bit differently.
One of the things, I'll get back to the second part of this question in a second. The one thing that I also seem to think is a lot of the Gen Zers have seen their family, friends, parents go through job loss, and they don't, any of the ones I've talked to don't have the same expectation of being in a place for 10, 20 years or 25 years like their parents. Some of them actually said, I'm interested in being a consultant right off the bat because I want to try different things out. And I know many years ago, I would do job hopping too out of necessity. So I'm wondering if you find that as well, that they don't have the same expectation of being at that employer for long enough to get like the gold watch or whatever.
Without a doubt. I can give you a number of stories right now of Gen Zers who were in their first position for 6 or 7 months. And through this whole great resignation, opportunities came to them that they could not turn down. They came to me and said, I've got this opportunity. And I said to them, I don't think you can turn it down. Where pre-2020, I always said, I would stick out at the current place you're at for another year and a half, 2 years, whatever it might be. But they are moving quickly. They are moving to different roles. To your point, they have incredible entrepreneurial spirit. I did a little bit of survey of Gen Zers across America, and I called out a number of personas from entrepreneur to activists to others. And they, it's that entrepreneur that most of them associate with, the entrepreneur spirit. So whether as a consultant, as starting my own company, starting my own business, I'm seeing a lot of that as well. The idea that maybe I don't have to take the traditional route, but I can launch my own company or my own consultancy. I was just in touch with one of my Gen Zers yesterday, who 2 years ago graduated. So I'm just going to launch my own social and digital media company. And 2 years later, he's doing very well with that company. So he never, other than internships, graduated and kind of took the traditional job. He launched his own company the day he graduated.
So the other question that Marty asked was about strategies for ageism at the level of those just starting out, not enough experience. And that goes back to job specs. I mean, I think that's a whole discussion with hiring managers, and really, do they really know what they're looking for when they put junior down? What does it mean? But I mean,
Yeah.
so
Yeah, so I think at least from the we'll call it the entry level employee standpoint, okay. What I tell my students now, and I think the world has changed a lot, even from when I graduated many years ago. To me, all experience today is good experience. And what I mean by that is, we now live in a world full of content creators and social media. And of course, I teach in public relations and marketing, so I'm kind of around that all the time. So if they're doing or handling social media for an organization on campus, for a nonprofit in the community, for a small business, that's experience.
Mm-hmm.
When I was in college, experience was you got on the train, you went to New York, you worked somewhere 5 days a week. That to me that can still be experience today, but it doesn't have to be. It can be remote. It can be virtual. It can be for 10, 15, 20 hours a week. It can be volunteering and handling social media for, again, a nonprofit organization that needs the help and needs the mindset of maybe a Gen Zer who better understands Instagram and TikTok. So when I help my students with their resumes and resume development, and they send me their resume, I look at it, but before I really go too deep, I say, by the way, is there anything not on this resume that you're doing, again, social media for an organization, for a club, you have your own podcast, you have your own blog. Well, actually, I do. I've got this. That all should be on the resume because, again, especially if they're looking for jobs, and I'll just call it greater world marketing, that all is marketing, content creation, content production, content distribution. That's all marketing. You don't necessarily have to do it for the biggest company in the world. You can be doing it for small organizations, local organizations, small businesses, and you just have to kind of bring that through in your narrative as you conduct your interview.
I think one of the things which I think a lot about is my kids, your kids grew up in a whole different time than we did. It's almost like a whole post 9/11 thing, and they're used to certain things. And I hate to bring it up, but even shootings and things, this is what they're used to in their world. And I think it reflects to some extent the whole mental health discussion and even what the expectations are out there, good or bad.
Well, yeah, I would say that. And we haven't talked on it too much. So I want to make sure we get in before we wrap up.
Sure.
This during the pandemic. So again, starting in that February, March 2020, right? The transition from in-person learning to remote learning, transition from the classroom to Zoom. Many Gen Zers, including many in this book, have said, we've proven we can work remotely effectively and successfully. We've proven we don't necessarily need to travel into or commute into an office every single day. So another element or factor with Gen Z in the workplace, and again, recruiters know this very well and employers know this very well, is that they're not necessarily looking to go somewhere 5 days a week, physically 5 days a week. Again, ideally, based on my most recent survey, a hybrid situation would be what they're looking for. So I go into that office maybe a couple of days a week, 2 or 3, but I have that flexibility as well, where maybe 2 or 3, I'm able to do the work on my time, at my home, on my computer. And so that's something that's really come out of, if you think about it, 2020 and the pandemic, because prior to 2020 was the remote work. Yeah, there was some remote work, but I mean, I'm familiar now with organizations, especially I'll call them mid-size, 50, 60, 70, who've actually given up their office space and have gone completely remote. And there's a pro and con to that as well. Again, the con as well, we're not physically together collaborating, because we all know there's benefit in physically collaborating together. But the pro is that you can now look for the best talent anywhere in this country, anywhere in this world. They don't necessarily need to be just in your city or within 30, 40, 50 miles of your city. So I've got now Gen Z college students who graduated within the last year or 2 or 3 who are working for agencies in California. But those agencies in California have now gone 100% remote, but yet these students now live in New Jersey. And so they're enjoying the fact that they can do the work right from here in New Jersey. They're working for a California-based company, and periodically throughout the year, the company brings everyone together to make sure that they do have some in-person collaboration.
I do think the media, to some extent, and the perception is to blame for this us against them mentality between the generations. Everyone does really want to work together in a collaborative way. I really do believe that. I think the narrative that's out there really kind of, it just seems wrong at times. I mean, yes, every generation has their different things going on, but most people really do want to collaborate, I believe.
It's in all of our best interests, whether you're the CEO of a company or a mid-level executive down to the entry level. It's in all our best interests to collaborate, right? To work together, to listen to each other, to understand that great ideas, great thinking, great problem solving can come from senior level. It could also come from junior level. It's funny, when I go out and deliver my speeches, I always emphasize to employers, I say, don't underestimate what I call your ZEOs. Those Gen Zers that are either your interns or you just hired in the last year or two or three. Believe it or not, they've got some pretty great ideas. They've got some interesting solutions. They might bring some things to the table. So just be open-minded. Have those, have your eyes and ears open to those ZEOs. They can deliver some value that you just may not be anticipating because they're just out of college.
And I think the mindset is different too. They're much more willing to ask questions and be inquisitive. When I was in the workplace, as you were, we were sometimes loath to ask certain questions, lest we be perceived as the person that didn't know what they were doing, if you will. And it's a whole different mindset. It's like, ask away, be an open book.
Yeah, it is. Not to. I know a lot of us probably love Ted Lasso, but I be curious, ask questions. That's something that I tell every one of my students or anyone I'm mentoring who's going off to an internship or a job. Be curious, ask questions. Don't just take on an assignment and cross your fingers and hope you interpreted the directions or the instructions the right way and bring it back 24, 48 hours later. So I think it's really, really important. I just, one of my students just was hired last Friday by a very large organization. And the director who hired her sent me a note and just said, "Hey, I'm excited your student's going to join our company. And we're going to teach her and help her and all that." And I said, "Well, be ready. She's going to ask a lot of smart questions." And he said, "That's great." And I said, "No, just be ready. She will ask a lot of smart questions because that's what she did in the classroom. And that's what led to success by asking those questions."
So again, Dr. Scott, what might be effective ways to help students, especially the first generation students, build certain networking skills? I can speak a little bit from what's worked for me at William Patterson. You have to get them engaged in the workplace outside of what is being taught. And in some cases, they're so afraid to take that first step because they just don't know what that first step is. I'm working with someone at William Patterson, and he's a really nice guy, but and he's struggling with things that become second nature to me only because I've done them for a while. And I've said to him, ask questions. Don't be afraid to put yourself out there. This is your time. And I think that's a perception that happens in a lot of cases, especially with the first generation who don't have the support at home.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. For some of my courses, I actually, for most of my courses, I should say, one of my assignments is I set up each student individually with an executive in the field that the student wants to get into when they graduate. So if a student during their introduction says, I love music and I want to get into music marketing, I set them up with a music marketer during the course of the semester. And they have to actually do an assignment where they interview them and write an assignment. To me, the more important part of it is not that. It's about the connection they can make and leveraging that connection and networking with that connection. And so I try on my own to try to make as many connections and marriages between students and individuals in the field where the student wants to go. But to your point, Ken, for many students, someone may need to help them make that first connection and just kind of break down that barrier and open the door for them and give them a chance to meet others. But they've got to be able to have a kind of a proactive mindset and be able to to reach out, network, connect.
I do. I actually have with my student, we've done role-playing interviews. I've actually, and again, it's meant with best intentions.
Yeah.
And we will work through what the answers are because it's not that they're not willing or interested, they just don't know. And, sometimes, it's the old tell me about yourself. It's the old about why should I hire you sort of thing and whatever it is. And it's just working with them. It's rewarding for me because it helps me, stay young, if you will, but it's also great to see the success stories. And it's a great chance for these students to really try things out. So would you?
Well, it kind of goes back to, and I'm not saying I have the right idea or if it's even feasible. Well, it kind of goes back to that idea of sophomore year mandatory course, career 101, career networking 101, career development 101, whatever you want to call it. I think if we all had to take that course for 14 or 15 weeks sophomore year, I think at least give us a foundation that now we can kind of build on that the summer between sophomore and junior year, senior, et cetera. So I completely agree with you.
So I think, as we're ending the conversation, first I want to thank you very much, Mark, for being here. And, you and I share a lot of things. I think one of the challenges that we have is to get the educators to recognize so many great students out there through their programs, because not every program has the great things that Rutgers has, and even if it's just um, an extra class, something like that, or something they can just make available online. Um, but I think it's really up to all of us to bring this out and let them know that there are things that they can do, and people like myself are very willing to help as well. Are there opportunities, do you think, at colleges for people like us to actually be part of an alumni association or get involved in some of these discussions, do you think?
I think so. I mean, it's probably, college by college, university by university, but every student, and we just finished this assignment in two of my classes, every student has a story to tell. In one of my courses, we spend time developing their personal brand narrative and
Mm-hmm.
their personal brand strategy to help them, what I say, win the job. And so every student has a story, has a compelling story, has unique elements of their narrative. Um, and I always use examples like, they may be great in the classroom, but maybe they earned a black belt outside the classroom. Well, the black belt stands for a lot of things. It stands for commitment to excellence, dedication to success, a focus. Boy, I'd hire a black belt any day of the week, right? So there's those elements that every student has different ones, but they're powerful and valuable. And so one is they need to be able to know, okay, this is part of my story. This is part of my narrative. This is part of my storytelling. And then to your point, it's the idea, and it goes back to several of the questions that were asked is, either understand or at least be pushed in the direction of there are resources on campus, off campus, as you just said, alumni groups. I'm a, again, I know I teach at Rutgers, but I tell all my students, everyone who's part of Rutgers Nation, all the alums, every one of them is eager, willing, and able and wants to help you because you're kind of part of the same, the same Rutgers Nation. And so I think that applies to every university across the country.
Now, are there any other questions that people have? I want to give everyone a chance to ask any other questions that they have. I know one of the things I keep pushing is for schools to have their alumni association LinkedIn company pages out there, stay in touch as much as possible. I think the challenge that we all have is to get a good collaboration. I tell students all the time to attend networking events, even though they don't necessarily they don't think they're comfortable there, because it's good practice, whether it's an elevator pitch or just being a part of other events. And there's nothing to stop. And I've even said this to our college: create your own event, invite your own people to attend the event. I mean, it doesn't have to be an event that someone else is putting on.
Yeah, I had one of my former students. I bring in many, many, many guest speakers throughout the semester at all my classes, and these range from CEOs to some of my students only graduated in the last year or two. But one of my students, who's kind of the trend guru at what was called Viacom CBS, is now Paramount. He came in a few weeks ago, and he just his emphasis to all the students was secure as many informationals, and again, we know what he means, informational interviews, but he meant secure as many as you can. It gives you practice in meeting, it gives you practice in networking, it gives you practice in interviewing. But he goes, those informationals could open doors that could lead to the opportunity. But unless you go out there and proactively secure them, you'll never know. And so he just talked about his experience as an undergrad, and just every chance he got, he just asked for the chance for a cup of coffee meeting, the chance for an informational interview. And he said he took away something from each one that contributed to the success he's having now.
And I would say when you connect with people on LinkedIn, be very specific on what you're asking. Don't send send what you're looking for help for. Maybe you want an informational interview. Maybe you just want to have a couple minutes of their time.
Sure.
Be very targeted. So I want to thank you very much, Mark, for joining us today. I wish you the best of luck and your students as well. So
thank you very much. No, this was great. Really appreciate it. Me, I love discussing careers and networking. Especially love talking about Generation Z. Also want to thank all those who joined in and asked questions. I love seeing a lot of familiar names pop up and ask questions. All those questions were smart and strategic and provided valuable insights for especially Gen Zers out there.
All right. Have a great day, everyone. I'm going to be taking off next week, telling everyone this right now. It's Memorial Day, and we'll be back on June 7th. So have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.